Good afternoon and welcome to the 29th annual exhibit of Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies. We've been talking about one subject for a long time, the shift to net zero. I think everyone's heard the term before, net zero. That is, at the end of the day, you've added nothing to the CO2 in the environment. One way of looking at net zero. We have an expert in the field, Denis Thomas, who's Global Business Development Leader at Accelera by Cummins, and we're going to be talking about accelerating the shift to net zero. Please welcome with me Denis Thomas. Hello, Denis.
Good afternoon.
So before we do anything, we should talk about Accelera. I love the title, Accelera by. It's like by the sea, by Cummins. What's in the name?
Yes, so what's in the name? You can already directly see the link with Cummins. So it means that we are Cummins. Actually, we introduced Accelera 1 month ago on the 8th of March, which is our brand for all our zero-emission technologies that we have in the Cummins portfolio. And mainly we have technologies in the field of hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen electrolyzers, hydrogen storage technologies, but also in the field of electric propulsion and electric axles as well.
So this is interesting for me. When we were talking about this during the prep, Cummins has acquired assets in the field of renewable energy. Can you talk a bit about that and about the strategy? It's got to the point where you need a name for this unit within the company.
Yes, and in fact that was also a requirement from those companies. They wanted to belong to a strong brand, and that's why also we created Accelera. So there have been different acquisitions. There was the acquisition of Hydrogenics in the field of electrolyzers and fuel cells. There's been, I'd say, some acquisitions in the field of solid oxide fuel cells. There's been acquisitions in the field of electric powertrains. We acquired Meritor last year. And we have also a joint venture with Nprox for hydrogen storage tanks. And so that's why we wanted to bring everything under the same roof with a new name to also mention to the market, to the investors, to the employees that want to join us, that we want to accelerate our development and give more visibility about those developments.
This is fascinating. You just mentioned Hydrogenics. For those of you who've been here for a while, we go back in time and look at companies like Hydrogenics as one of the big players. I mean, and to have acquisitions and this process of consolidation, this interests me simply because we have to explain why some companies disappear and then reappear as part of a larger company. What are the logistics there? Is it synergies that you're looking at?
Yes, clearly there are synergies. So to give the explanation about Hydrogenics, clearly one of the main motivation was the fuel cell activity of Hydrogenics that attracted Cummins. Because obviously what we see in the mobility sector is that a lot of our customers that were buying diesel engines, they wanted to find, let's say, new solutions, clean solutions or cleaner solutions. And so to make the move to fuel cells was a very logical move. That's also why last year, as Cummins, we have launched our hydrogen engine. I've heard it was discussed in the panel before. So we like to offer like multiple technologies because we believe that there is no one-fit-all solution. We think that we need a portfolio of solutions, and they will address different needs in the market. So this was clearly, I would say, the purpose of that acquisition. Obviously, on top of it, there was the acquisition of the electrolyzer business, which was kind of an interesting surprise for Cummins, because obviously the business dynamics in electrolyzers is very different from the one on fuel cells. And directly, so the projects are much more mature, they're much bigger in terms of scale. Also, the customers are not the same. While on fuel cells, we are selling to say truck OEMs, trains OEMs, bus OEMs. On the electrolyzer side, our customers, they are like energy companies, oil and gas companies, industrial gas companies. So it's a completely different type of business.
We can actually get back to the topic of electrolyzers because I love the issue. Yeah. But the big thing that I heard as we were preparing for this talk was this is like an ecosystem approach to alternative technologies. Could you describe this ecosystem and what are the components that are offered and how are they related to one another, if at all?
Yes. So in fact, we described that ecosystem in 4 main pillars. And there is the pillar of hydrogen production, which is obviously the electrolyzer pillar. And there we offer two types of solutions based on alkaline and PEM technologies. Alkaline more for the small scale type of applications, and PEM for projects more, say, above 2 megawatts up to like 250 megawatts. So that's the current offering there. Then on hydrogen storage tanks, we are a joint venture with Nprox. In fact, we offer solutions for like onboard storage of hydrogen, so for heavy-duty applications especially, but also for the transport of hydrogen. So containers, which are full of tanks, high-pressure tanks, up to 640 bar, which can be then transported and then brought to hydrogen refilling stations. So that's one of the key applications. And then we have activities around fuel cells for mobility applications. So many, as I mentioned, trucks, buses, trains. I think you have all seen the train of Alstom. Actually, it is powered by Accelera fuel cells and also using the hydrogen storage tanks of Nprox. So we see that we can already have a type of ecosystem between those different technology blocks. And then the last application, it's fuel cells for stationary power. More as a replacement to diesel gensets, so for backup power or prime power generation, mainly through PEM fuel cells, or we're also developing solid oxide fuel cell technologies in that respect. And so those are the four pillars that you can actually use and create an ecosystem around those.
When we go back in time, way back in the 60s, there was a Scientific American article about the hydrogen economy. And of course, engineers understand this. You have renewable energy. What do you do with it? It's electrical, so you need to store it and do other things with it. So you split the water molecule and you have hydrogen, and you use exclusively hydrogen. You can convert it back into electrical energy with the PEM cell. You can do a pile of things for the industry with hydrogen. Largely, this model is all based or driven upon the concept of renewable energy. And I made the mistake of saying to Denis as we were preparing, yeah, isn't the whole development here at the fair where we have a record number of clients, isn't it driven by the fact that we have renewable energies and so much of it that we don't know what to do with it? And you said, well, you know, decarbonization. Can you describe what that involves on an industrial scale?
Yes, certainly. So indeed, where we were 10 years ago here, it was purely driven by, I want to store my energy and I want to do something else than batteries. And then there was the option of, let's say, producing hydrogen out of it. But in fact, the main driver for hydrogen is the need for decarbonization. And what our customers are looking is to decarbonize their application. This can be in transport, this can be in power generation, and this can be in industry. And we have seen really a tipping point after the Paris Agreement, where everyone had to make this net zero calculation. How can I become net zero in 2050? And it means you cannot consume CO2 anymore in all your applications. And so for those applications, especially in industry, hydrogen is the only answer that can provide a net zero solution. And that's where we see today most of the traction, especially on the electrolyzer side, but also on mobility. And we are convinced that the mobility will be dominated by batteries, fuel cells, hydrogen engines, but also potentially like sustainable fuels, like electrofuels, etc. And so we see that really the demand is coming from there. Obviously, with the link with renewables, it's not really about the energy storage dimension, even if it will be an answer to that, but it's not the driver. The driver is the low cost of renewable energy. And this really makes a case interesting for the generation of hydrogen at competitive price because of the low cost of renewable power. And what we see is that the biggest projects, they are developed actually outside of Europe, in the middle of nowhere, where the energy storage is not the question. That's where the electricity cost is the lowest. And that's where you can generate the cheapest hydrogen. And so a lot of those projects, for instance, they are green ammonia projects to transport the hydrogen or the energy from wind and solar abundant countries to countries like Germany, which will need to import clean energy. And that's really what we have seen evolving over the last years.
You mentioned among the products that you focus on, and it's there at the booth. The booth, by the way, is D59. Drop by to see the Accelera booth. You have a 135 kilowatt unit. That that is one example of a unit that can be used in transportation, mobile applications.
Yes. So you are very welcome to our booth, actually, to see that new product, which has just been launched a few weeks ago. So that's a new fuel cell package based on the new product. That's the first that we launch also as Accelera, as a product, which is indeed 150 kilowatts power output, which can also be combined to make a 300 kilowatt system. So typically for buses, truck type of applications. And so that's a new generation, and we'll be very happy to inform you about, let's say, the main advantages that we see. They are around power density, so very compact power design. Also, it is compatible with some of the applications that we see on the engine side. So in terms of the shape of the product, it can fit into some of the existing vehicles, replacing some, engines. And also in terms of technology, there are some specificities that we have added to that product to make it compatible with this type of applications on the cooling, etc. But I don't want to go too much into the technical details.
Where do you see, for your business model, the larger business propositions? There's always been this running debate about, literally 20 years ago, okay, how's the car industry doing? Long before we have competitive cars on the consumer market, we're going to have trucks and buses. So this is always the question, is what's going to come first? You must be interested in the short and midterm phases of transitioning to net zero because you have to survive the transition. It has to be a business model. So where's the business model now, a few years from now, and long term?
Yes. So probably just also to give some numbers, because it's also linked to that. As Cummins, last year we generated 28 billion of revenues. I would say mainly on the usual businesses of Cummins, which are linked to engines, diesel and gas engines. As Accelera, we have an ambition to reach 6 to 13 billion US dollar revenues by 2030. So it means that we believe strongly that there is a huge market opportunity on those applications. And obviously, each one evolves at a different speed. And sometimes 10 years ago, we are thinking fuel cells will develop much quicker. But actually, it's much more complex than anticipated to have all the automotive industry actually moving towards fuel cell technologies. Where we see currently the biggest traction in terms of volume of business, that's clearly the electrolyzer business. Because the projects, they have increased significantly in terms of size. We delivered in 2015 the first megawatt scale electrolyzer project to Falkenhagen in Germany, first power to gas project. But now 2 megawatts seems a little bit very small for the electrolyzer business. We are into projects, let's say, between 10 up to 500 megawatts in current discussion right now. We just signed a contract for a 90 megawatt project in Canada 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it shows that here we are directly talking about big volumes, single projects. While on the automotive part, it's more, I would say, a repetitive business, smaller transactions at the beginning to create the market, but the potential is huge because then you're in a very repetitive type of business. So really believe it's a complex, I would say, matter, but that all the signs are there that it will be there. So hydrogen is clearly part of the ecosystem. It's not a question if, it's a question when, how, which products, with whom. Those are the key questions.
Back in the day, of course, oh, by the way, if there's a question from the audience, just wave at me and I hope I see you. Back in the day when we started this fair, the attention getters were always the mobile fuel cells. Mobile applications were just sexy, hard to beat. Give us a car. And in fact, we had several cars. We had, driving experiences you could share. We're underestimating the stationary applications of fuel cells, aren't we? So what activities do you have with stationary applications of fuel cells? Of course, electrolyzers are always generally stationary things, but fuel cells, we think of them as mobile. So what stationary applications do you have?
Yes, so currently we are focusing on applications on backup power. As you know, also Cummins, we supply a lot of diesel generators for backup power. And so a lot of our customers, like data centers, hospitals, they are looking at ways to also decarbonize those applications. So that's clearly a focus application. Then there is everything which is linked to like microgrids that needs to be actually stabilized by usually gensets that also want to use, I would say, 100% renewable energy solutions. So I would say those are really the two main the two main applications for stationary power. But we might see in the future when hydrogen will become so cheap that you will see, let's say, prime power generation, I would say, on the basis of hydrogen. And then you will be more in projects where you will have a continuous, I would say, production of power based on hydrogen. But for this, your fuel needs to be extremely cheap. And so this, we don't see it yet. It's more like for applications which are used, let's say, for a portion of the time, but not continuously.
It is kind of the thrilling and interesting aspect of renewable energy. It's actually an affordable kilowatt hour. They're not really telling the truth when they say, oh, renewable energies are too expensive, we'll never afford them. But the interesting thing is how to get that into all applications. And here, the concept Accelera, I love the idea of having core technologies in one company. So what are the synergies that you see there? If you have engineers dedicated to net zero, but in various applications of the hydrogen and fuel cell industry, do you see spin-off synergies that surprise you?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. We didn't discuss it during the preparation. But there are plenty of opportunities. I think, and that's what makes it very interesting, actually, to work in hydrogen and fuel cell today. We are learning every day. Yeah. Obviously, there are a lot of synergies on the different, let's say, blocks of components, and you can really make a deep dive in each technology. There are, say, still a lot of room for improvement in terms of efficiency, durability, cost, etc. There are also quite a lot of things to be done on the integration work of those technologies. How can you actually minimize the cost by making a smart design? For instance, if you are thinking about new vehicle, which is combining, batteries, hydrogen fuel cell, and the storage, depending on the duty cycle, you don't get always to the same kind of combination. It depends on the type of duty cycle, whether you are a mining truck, a school bus, or like a coach, etc. You will have a different, and so there is quite a lot of work to be done there. And obviously the link with universities is important because a lot of those innovations are also created in universities and spin-off. And so we have also at Accelera people dedicated at say, looking around and trying to see which of those innovations are compatible with our technology roadmap. And we have an acquisition type of strategy. When we see an interesting technology, we want to acquire it or making like a partnership to make sure that we can offer it in our portfolio and learn from it.
Denis, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You will have an opportunity to see Denis again at the electrolyzer elevator pitch in the technical forum. I believe it's on, are you Tuesday or Wednesday?
I think it's tomorrow.
Okay,
no?
So Tuesday, there's an electrolyzer pitch. That's one of the booming sectors, and that's really one of your fortes, isn't it? It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope to see you back here next year.
Thank you. And feel free to come to our booth. That's D59. That's in that direction, like 50 meters. There is also the NPROX booth, which is E33, which is just behind this technical forum or public forum.
In that direction. Okay. Thank you, Denis.
Thank you, Ryan.